I hate to say it, but Mushoku Tensei has a huge problem. No matter how you look at it, Season 2 just isn't that hype. Which I hate to say as someone who's recently gotten into it, but on top of the fact that there's a million other great shows to watch like JJK and Zom 100, there's a few things going on that are killing the hype. Now, if you're already a Mushoku Tensei fan, then I'm sure you're like, okay, so what? Who cares? Which is a perfectly valid response. As a Dr. Stone fan, I am very familiar with one of my favorites being cursed into irrelevance. That doesn't mean it's not one of the best anime out right now. And the same is true for Mushoku Tensei. Mushoku Tensei is still one of the best anime you can watch. For starters, it stands alongside Re:Zero as one of the pioneers in the isekai genre. This is before the massive wave of isekai we have today, where a person becomes insert weird thing in fantasy world, and then we completely forget that it's an isekai. An isekai is meant to be a story where a far from perfect person is transported into another world and given a do-over, a chance to recognize their faults and become a better person. And Mushoku Tensei does a great job of this. You see Rudy grow as a character early on. He starts out with overwhelming social anxiety, so much so that he's not even comfortable leaving his house. So in this life he's able to break out of that shell and be better than he was in his past life. Now, there's obviously some not so great traits from his past life, but we'll save those for later. On top of that, it's a great fantasy story. Granted, it's nothing revolutionary. It's full of plenty of fantasy tropes. But those tropes are done brilliantly. Mushoku Tensei takes the time to slowly establish its world and make it immersive. And that's exactly what it accomplishes. It slowly gets you interested in the different races, languages, and continents, the multifaceted magic system and power system, the legendary battle against the demon lord that influenced the world. All of these should be familiar if you've played games like Final Fantasy or read books like Lord of the Rings, but it's all so good. The world is fleshed out in a way where each new detail slowly makes you more invested in the lore of the world as the story goes on. Also, Mushoku Tensei does characters brilliantly as well. They also start out fairly tropey, but they get fleshed out over time. For example, there's Ruijerd. He's the stoic warrior who wants to go out and rebuild his clan's honor. Nothing you haven't seen before. But the more you spend time with Ruijerd, the more he learns about the world and grows beyond that trope. He doesn't become this wildly different character, but he does develop his own quirks. It's a character you've met before, but still feels uniquely its own. And that's true for a lot of the characters in Mushoku Tensei. But as great as Mushoku Tensei is, it obviously still comes with its flaws. But before I say anything else, make sure to like the video if you're enjoying it so far. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it helps spread the video to other viewers like you. Now, let's just address the elephant in the room. Mushoku Tensei is gross. And I don't just mean Rudy, even though Rudy is the big offender. At first, it's sort of funny when he's just a baby, but it gets real old real fast. Not only is it the same joke over and over again, but it's not even funny. Like, let me explain what I mean with a couple of examples. Let's go to Dragon Ball, which is notorious for this kind of humor. With a character like, say, Roshi, we can recognize that none of his behavior is acceptable, but we can also admit that the kind of stuff he does is so over the top and so cartoonish that it's detached from reality, and that's where we can at least see the humor in it. With a character like Rudy, the stuff he does and the stuff he says is just a little too real. It's the kind of thing that someone on Twitter in real life would get cancelled for right away. Now, to compare to another series, let's look at Konosuba. Konosuba has a lot of similar kinds of jokes, but not only are they over the top, they also point out the tropes of these kinds of dynamics and blatantly make fun of them. Mushoku Tensei will directly name these same tropes, and then proceeds to follow them anyway. And I know people will say, oh, but Rudy gets better. He learns to be better and grows as a character. And to that, I have two responses. First of all, okay, he's still gross. Like, even if he gets better, it's still there. You still have to watch all of those scenes to get to where we are now. And the other thing is, like, are we really gonna pretend it's just Rudy? The entire show is just gross. It is in your face from the very first episode, and it is a problem with like every other character in one way or another. No, of course, you can still enjoy Mushoku Tensei. It's just that this aspect of the show is unavoidable. You cannot watch it without getting through these scenes. Just like you cannot watch the show without watching the earlier parts. Which is a non-problem if you're already caught up. But let's say you're a new fan. One of the other big turnoffs is the pacing in early Season 1. Everyone can agree that Season 1 is a slow burn. It takes its time building the world and setting up the characters. As a result, it feels like almost nothing happens for a solid 6 to 7 episodes. At least. Even as someone who quickly got invested in the characters and the lore, there was always a moment in each episode where I was like, I wonder if I can just skip this. Now thankfully I played the long game, but the average person does not have the patience for this kind of pacing, even if it gets much better and there are massive payoffs. Especially when they have dozens of other shows to watch. Which brings me to my point about Mushoku Tensei's competition. Back in 2021, Mushoku Tensei was one of the best anime of that year. But somehow not only was it not nominated for Anime of the Year, it didn't even win Best Fantasy of that year. Back then, its competition was JJK, Slime Anime, and Attack on Titan. And the competition this year is just as bad, if not worse. You have JJK Season 2. You have Bleach. There's Zom 100, which some people are already saying could be Anime of the Year. There's Spy Family Season 2. There's Frieren, a series recently nominated for Manga of the Year and is constantly hyped up. I mean, if Mushoku Tensei lost Best Fantasy to Slime Anime, it's definitely losing to Frieren from what I've heard. And of course, there's Undead Unluck, one of the best manga in Jump right now that's going to be adapted by Dave Pro and will be one of the most talked about anime of the year. So, you look at all of that competition, you look at how Mushoku Tensei performed against previous competition, and it's clear that Mushoku Tensei will have a hard time standing out. Already it's struggling this season. Maybe I'm wrong and I'm just not on the right timeline, but I really only see Mushoku Tensei fans talking about the anime right now. I don't see a ton of hype for it. Which brings me to my point from earlier. So what? So what if it's not the most hyped show? Why does it have to be hyped up for me to enjoy it? Well, it doesn't have to be hyped up. You just have to think it's hype. But that's the problem. Sure, Mushoku Tensei is a great anime, and there's a lot to be excited about in Season 2. But you have all of the problems we talked about that turn away new fans. Then when current fans try to hype up the series, people just use these things to meme on the show. Couple that with all of the show's competition right now, and it just makes it hard to get excited about the show and talk about it with other people. And this is only made worse by the fact that once again, each core of Mushoku Tensei will be separated by several months. Core 1 is out right now, and apparently Core 2 isn't coming out until 2024. And at this point with shows like AOT and JoJo's Part 6, we know that separating seasons like this is always a buzzkill. So does any of this mean that Mushoku Tensei is a bad show? No, not really. But you take that problem, and the pacing problem, all of its competition, and the scheduling of Season 2, and you just find yourself not as hype as you should be. You can't hype it up with other people like you would JJK because non-fans will just meme on you. And the two cores thing and the fact that there's like a million other things to watch that are honestly more exciting makes it hard to get as excited for the show as you'd like to be. And that is what I mean when I say Mushoku Tensei has a big problem. But maybe you disagree. Maybe Mushoku Tensei is that hype. Maybe there's something I missed. Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And if you'd like another discussion like this one, then check out my recent video on Zom 100. In that video, I explain why Zom 100 will be one of your next favorite anime. You can find it in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.